Today we're going to be talking just more in depth here about the ribbon bars, some more advanced concepts in cabinet vision with respect to coordinate systems and some like that. So we'll just dive right in here. To start, I'm just going to start a new job in cabinet vision, so I can get into the menus. I'm just going to leave it named job. Actually, one thing I did not show yesterday, I will just show this real fast. If name a job, give it a job number it says, but it's really the name of the job, and I say OK. It comes in. You can see this at the top of my screen if your meeting window is blocking this, but it would say at the top of your screen untitled at this point. If I go and at this point save this job, and I'll just save it out to my desktop and it auto names it Jones because that's what I already named the job. If I say save, this didn't change. There's a little problem in cabinet vision. Sometimes I have to change my view. There it goes. Now it says Jones, so you should see the file name you're working on up here at the top of your screen. So let me just maximize again here. All right, so yesterday we talked about the ribbon bar and that it was a dynamic toolbar, meaning every different mode you're in, you see different buttons up here. We didn't really cover in depth any of these buttons. So today I wanted to do that. Real quick, just to get a basic layout here, I'm going to just place some cabinets or some walls in the room and then some cabinets on those walls. So to start with, I'll just draw the walls in. And today, again, the first time I click on Davis Millen Cabinet, it pops up this window. Today I'm not going to make any selections there. I'm just going to hit next and then finish, bypass all of that. So I've at least entered something. It's just the defaults. So then I'll just drop a couple of cabinets on this wall. So what I want to do is go through this ribbon bar based on each of the different modes that we could view it in. Now, some of these buttons are going to be consistent regardless of which mode we're in. Others will change as we move on from one mode to another. So clipboard is basic Windows kind of functionality. You can cut, copy, or paste cabinets. You can also do that by clicking on a cabinet, then right-click and pick copy, and then paste next to it just by clicking again. You can also use keyboard shortcuts just like in Windows. A Control X is copy, or a cut, excuse me. Control V would be to paste it again. The nice thing about this functionality is I can highlight groups of cabinets, Control X to cut and Control V to paste. Now I've got a bigger cabinet here, it looks like, but it's really both of those cabinets I just cut. So I can paste it next to the cabinet. So I can move cabinets around. Sometimes you'll need to change a length or change the layout slightly, and rather than grab each cabinet and butt it over into the next cabinet one at a time, you can grab entire groups of cabinets, Control X for cut, Control V again for paste, and paste it wherever you like along that wall or on a different wall if you wanted to. So, but that's the clipboard function. This is your zoom functions, pretty self-explanatory. Window zooms in on whatever I draw a box around. Zoom out is just a step out at a time. Zoom all just puts it kind of centered in your screen. I typically don't use the zoom buttons or this clipboard button. I use the keyboard shortcuts, Control X or V for cut and paste, and I use my mouse scroll wheel for zoom in and out. One thing we didn't talk about yesterday is just basic navigation. If you've got enter mouse wheel, you can just really click and pan your screen around. Center mouse wheel scrolling zooms in and out. So render mode is change how you're looking at your screen. Right now I've got it on wire mode. If I go to fill mode, you'll see colors attached to those. If I go to texture mode, wood grain texture. The texture mode tends to run quite a bit slower. You can see that zoom is a little choppier. So I almost never use textured mode other than when I am inspecting something. There are some uses for it, but most of the time I'll use wireframe or fill mode. One quick thing on fill mode, that's a handy tool. If you notice, the core of each of these cabinets is green. It's green color. The core of the melamine that makes that up. The green represents particle board. If put a finished end on one of these cabinets, this turn to pink. That pink color denotes poly material, where it has finished veneer on one side and melamine on the other side. If I have a finished veneer interior cabinet, let me find a wild card, and I'll just, let's see, we'll go to finish and finished interior. I'm going to drag that wild card out on this cabinet. Now I click that cabinet and double hit enter to refresh the cabinet like we talked about yesterday. Now notice a blue color. Blue denotes two-sided veneer, so you know now that this cabinet is all finished veneer. This is just a shortcut way of looking at your room and seeing what materials it's made out of, finished ends and that kind of thing. You can also tell finished ends by this little finished end indicate if I finish both ends. That will appear on both sides. Same icon will show up if you're looking in the elevation view. It also shows up if you have a wall cabinet, for instance, that has a finished bottom wild card on it. You'll see this arrow at the bottom pointing up at the bottom of the cabinet. So just one quick of the render modes. Most of the time I operate in wireframe just because it's the fastest, smoothest running one. Window mode, you can do several things with that. You can split your screen. Some people like to run on multiple monitors. You can use that, or on a single monitor. I can set up so that I can look at different tabs. I can look at my reports view and my 3D view and my plan view at the same time, for instance. And if I make changes in one of those views, I'll see it take place in the other view. So same thing with your report. If I change the width of one of these cabinets, for instance this one, if I go to order entry and change that cabinet to, let's go 30 inches wide, and I'm going to, let's see what it does there. That actually took a refresh there. I had to click on each of the screens. So, but you kind of see the use of a window mode. I typically don't use window mode, but a lot of people do like it. So it's up to you. So if I come back here then to the main screen, these right here are one section that will change as we go to different views. This top one typically stays the same, but this one will change. This top one is referring to your layers. Layers in Cabinet Vision are just like layers in AutoCAD. I'm not sure. I don't know 2020 well enough to know if it's got that in it, but similar to AutoCAD functionality. We've got some of these that are standard layers. At the beginning of some of these, there's a W or a B. The B stands for a black background. The W is a white background. You'll notice that some of the details are not there on a low detail. If I go to medium detail, some more details will show up. If I high detail, even more details show up. The higher detail, the slower your system will run. So if you're on a slower computer, it might make sense to draw in a lower detail setting and then go to high detail for if you have a question about how the inside of a cabinet is set up or something like that. But to draw most of your time in low detail. If you've got a really fast computer, then most of the time you should be able to go in a high detail mode, which typically is how I draw. But it's a user preference. Now, these layers are standard to our library. So when we send you a catalog update, if you make a change to any of these layers, our catalog update will override these layers. There are ways to customize layers. We won't really go into too much depth with it today, but I'll show you a couple of quick tweaks you can do. The first is just a minor change to one of our existing layers. So if I'm on this layer, this show all details in black background, anywhere in your background, if I right-click, not cabinet or a wall, but just in the background, if I right-click and pick Properties, I have Layers tab in here. In this window, you can see all kinds of different types of objects or parts that make up objects. There are several icons here that are important. The first one is the light bulb. If I turn the light bulb, click on it, it turns the light bulb off. The light bulb denotes visible on your screen. The pencil denotes item will show up in your drawings when we print. So I can turn off one or both. They're independent of one another. I can also change the color of the items that show on your screen. So you can customize those however you want. You can also customize line types, line weights, those kinds of things. There's lots of these in here. There are times when I will go in and just for individual purpose I want to get rid of the drawer box that I can see in this cabinet. I might go in and get rid of drawer boxes here in my visual mode. So I'll hit the light bulb, turn it off, and then when I hit OK, now my drawer box disappears from this cabinet, and it makes it a little bit easier to see sometimes when I'm trying to look at a particular line. So you can use those however you want. Just be aware that any customizations you make to this list will be overridden when we send out a catalog update, but you're welcome to make any changes you like to this on whatever layer you like. Now these things are specific to whatever layer you're on and whatever view you're on, so you have different layer settings for each of the views on each of the layers. So there's lots and lots of different ways to customize this. One of the most common things to customize is the dimensioning. You can come in here, and we won't cover this too much in depth today, but you can edit the dimensioning, and I can edit different lines. When it refers to line, this is a line of dimensioning right here. This is another line. So if I'm in different views, different planar elevation or 3D views, I can customize how my dimensioning shows up and set to a specific layer. Now, what we're doing here is just customizing a standard layer, but if you want to make your own layer, if you don't like the standard layers that come in here, there is a way for you to make your own. So you would come, let's see, right so under this layers button, so layer schedules, and you could take one of these that you like and make a copy of it, and then rename your copy, whatever you'd like to call it, and customize that new copy. Now that new copy should stay. It should not be overridden by our catalog update. So you can customize that however you want. Otherwise, you can just use the layers that are already provided and tweak them as you need to. So the layers tool. Window right here, I'm going to skip it. We're going to come back to it here in just a second. So the next button then is the job window. We talked about this yesterday, that really this is just to go back in and change the job number or name. If initially you know it as lot 125 and later on it becomes the Jones residence, you can come back in and rename that. As you get closer to time of ordering, you can enter your PO number here or this address information, job site address information. So totally up to you how you want to use that. Those are really about the only things we use from the job button at the top here. Now, the room button can be a little bit confusing. If you'll notice when I hover my mouse over it, different halves of this button light up. The bottom half we briefly mentioned yesterday. I can click on that and go to my catalog and re-enter specifications for this room. Right? It's on the room button. Specifications I enter here will affect this room. The top of this room button is something different. That brings up the room specifications if we were running a non-modular catalog, which we are not. So there's very little that you'll use in this screen. There are a couple of things, and we'll come back to those as we get to them. This Notes tab is, actually let's cover it right now. This Notes tab is probably one of those. On your Notes tab, you'll notice custom wood species, custom melamine finishes, and your distressing features. If you remember from our options yesterday, if we pick a cabinet material, case material, if I scroll to the bottom of this list and I've got an exotic veneer or something that you've called in and gotten a price, and we say, oh, it's $300 a sheet material. So I would come down here and pick, say, a custom 200 with natural maple melamine. Now, that custom panel is only for pricing. It does not tell us what that panel is. So in order to utilize this, you would pick custom panel, and then I'd hit next and then finish. So I saved that as a custom panel too. But if I hover on something, I should see, in this case, notice this pop-out window. If you look down there, you'll see all the specifications for that cabinet. Notice the wood, it's abbreviated WD. blank after it. It doesn't really know what to put there. It should, if I come up here to the room button and go notes, exterior wood species, we're going to call this teak veneer. And then once I've entered that spec in there, I can hit OK. And now we'll see if this works here. Nothing on that pop-up window. If I look at my reports view, I should see, of course it's not. Try this real fast. There we go. Now it's updated enough. Teak veneer is here in my comment line. It should also now show as I hover on it. This was similar to the date of a wild card. If I drop a wild card on a cabinet, I need to hit enter 2 times. I didn't give the any reason to reevaluate or rebuild those cabinets, so that's why that teak veneer didn't show up. But now you see it there on that little yellow pop-up window. So that's how to put in a custom wood. You could do the same thing for your interior melamine finish. If you had us custom match a finish and we gave you a custom 12 as your fin factor, that custom 12 is only for pricing, but here you're going to type in whatever number we gave you. It might be door match, it might be, we might give you an actual number, and it might be paint and glaze 1004 or something to that effect. We may give you a number or a name for that finish. It just depends on the situation. So that's what you would enter here. Now the distressing is a little bit different. Remember, on all of these upper options, your pricing is only determined by what we enter in this window, either custom cabinet materials or a custom finish. If I scroll down to the bottom and pick a custom finish, those numbers dictate price. However, distressing is a little bit different. Remember, under distressing, I only have 3 options. I have none, yes, or custom. None, yes, do nothing as far as pricing. They're the bare bones. There's no upcharge for either one of those. If I click on custom, though, that custom isn't doing any upcharge either. It just says, okay, they're going to enter custom distressing, but it doesn't know at this point what distressing you want. If I pick custom, I'm going to hit next and finish, so I've saved it as custom distressing. Now I'm going to come back up here, not to the bottom half, but to the top half of my room button. And again, go to Notes tab. Now all the distressing features that we offer down here. So they all say none right now. If one of those distressing features has anything but the word none, it will add price for that feature. So if I type in a level 1, I type in small amount, or type in really up, whatever you want to type in there, you can type that in. It doesn't matter how heavy that feature is done. All that matters is that something other than the word none exists in this cell. So if you've put something other than the word none, it will look at the database and say, oh, well, nicks and dents are X amount of upcharge per square foot of finished surface, and upcharge you for that item. For instance, if you like standard distressing, but you don't want any wormholes, it is no longer standard, so you'd have to come in here and say something like this, standard, and then I could come here and paste something like that. So it's standard distressing without the wormholes. Now, because it's not standard, it's actually custom, you are paying at this point for your nicks and dents, your cracks, your glaze hang-up, that sort of thing. Another thing to note in here, remember, if it's anything but the word none, it's charging for it. So let's say you did this, and then later on they come back and say, no, we don't want it distressed now. So I come back in and delete these. You'd think that would be a no upcharge because none of them have anything noted, but again, these 4 cells here have something other than the word none, which means as far as the computer knows, there is something typed there. It just looks for the word none as a default to be none. If it's anything else, even a blank line, price is for that. So be very careful with deleting those without typing back in the word none. As you scroll down this list, there's several of them in here. Some of price heavier than others. The standard ones, nicks and dents, cracks, wormholes, glaze hang up, and rub through are the standards that would come on a simplicity door. wearing and biffing tend to add more than the standard distressing, particularly hewing. Hewing is where we take a hand block plane with a curved knife on it, and we actually hand hew the surface of all the veneers and the solid woods. It's a very labor-intensive kind of operation. It does charge more for that. If you have custom features, sometimes we've had people ask for fly sticks or cowtail or sometimes a distressing feature that some companies do that looks like you've taken the threads of a bolt and rolled it over the wood surface to get that kind of a look to it. That's where you'd use these custom distressing and just type in whatever it is that you want that custom distressing to be in there. So in the notes tab, distressing is the only thing that really applies to your pricing. Everything else is priced from back on this bottom half of the room button in your room selection. So that's important to remember. So I'm just going to cancel out of this now. So that's our room button. The modifications button is a really handy button. There's several tools on here that are really, really good to use, and some of them you'll never use. Quick Room, for example, I have never used it. I've never seen a real good, valid reason for using it. I like to draw my own walls and place my cabinets on. The Quick Room is the ability to draw a generic room and kind of get you lineal foot pricing. I avoid it. Copy Room is just what it sounds like. Notice this button here, this Room 1. If I open that drop down, it just says Room 1. We skipped over this icon here, this set of tools, because it changes depending on which view you're in. But when I'm in the plan view, this button is what room you're in. So I'm going to make a copy using the modification tools. Down and click on Copy Room. Like it didn't do anything, but now if I open up this drop down, I have Room 1 and copy of Room 1. Okay, so if I had multiple rooms in a job, I can make copies of rooms. We'll go back to this tool now that we're talking about it. I can also just add a new room. So now I have Room 3. So we had Room 1 and then the copy of Room 1, and it's came automatically and says, oh, well, this is room number 3. Now, there's a big difference between these two rooms. Because one of them was a new room, it's completely blank. This room is a copy. So it has the exact same cabinets that the other room had in it. That seems like you'd never really want to do that, but the nice thing about this room is if I now go to my objects into my catalog, notice it lets me right into the catalog. Room 3, we didn't make a copy of it, so in this room I have no access to the catalog. I can draw a wall, but now if I go to my catalog, objects into my catalog, now it pops up this options window again. It's going to require me on every new room to enter these specifications before I can drop a cabinet out on the wall. So if you have a room or a job that has multiple rooms of the same wood, finish, door style, all those specifications, it makes sense to set up a room first and then make multiple copies of that room so you don't have to go and re-enter all of these specifications every time. Now, if rooms are different in any way at all, it's up to you whether you want to copy it and then just tweak the one item that is different, say it's just a different color. You could do that very easily just by copying a room and changing just the color. But if everything's different on this list, it would probably make more sense to just create a new room with this button and go to that new room and then go through and set that room's specifications independently of the others. So now one other thing too in this room setting, notice the names of these. A lot of times you don't want to know these by Room 1, Room 2, Room 3. So under the Room button, not the bottom half, but again, this one, it's the top half. If I click on the top half, I change the room name to whatever I want. I can call it Kitchen. I can go to this room and we'll change that one to the Master Bath, that sort of thing. You can name it whatever you want. You can call it Room 1, Room 2, Room 3 if you want. It doesn't matter. But note now in the drop-down list, it tells me which room, by the name I entered in this room button, what the name is of that room. Important thing to remember when you're copying rooms, I'm going to go here to the kitchen, and let's say we had a whole kitchen layout in here, and I got done with everything, but I needed to add my molding. So I'm going to come in here and add a stick of crown molding, and let's add some toe kick, for instance. Let's say this is a really big kitchen, and it had 15 sticks of crown molding and say 18 sticks of toe kick. So this room, and then I said, oh yeah, but this room is the same door style color, so I'm going to copy this room. So I'm going to make a new copy of this kitchen. So now I drop down list, I have kitchen copy 1, and I go to this kitchen now and say, well, it's the same specs, but it's a different layout. So I'm going to highlight all of these walls, delete the walls, and start over. So now I start doing my room, and I place cabinets on my walls. And notice it just let me right in because we made a copy of an existing room, so I can come in here and I'll put this vanity for the master bath on the walls, whatever I'm making out of this room. Now, you may think everything's fine. However, if I go to the reports view, notice 2 pieces of molding I placed on the kitchen copied over to this room. You have to be very careful with that because you can end up copying a bunch of molding and really pricing things sky high if you've got a whole bunch of molding you don't need for additional copies of rooms. So just be careful of that. So let me come back to the plan view now. So it gives you the room button. Again, you can pick from here the drop-down list, or you can just cycle through rooms using these arrow keys. Either way is fine. So modifications copy room. Modifications delete room does, again, just what it says. So I can come in here and delete multiple rooms or just an individual room. Let's delete that kitchen copy and just say OK. And it'll ask if I want to, am I sure? Yes, we're sure. So I'll look up here. Now that kitchen room is gone, the kitchen copy. So that's delete room. Center room we showed yesterday, but I'll show it again here. If you've got your layout and your room is laid out in this sort of fashion, and you go to 3D, and it looks just fine, but notice when I spin that, it's spinning an axis somewhere over here. If I go to my plan view and modification center room, it centers on my blue crosshair. Now in 3D, it centers around the center of my room. It's a lot easier to manipulate in 3D, so that's modification center room. Now, reverse room is another feature, just like Quick Room, that I recommend not using. It does work. It'll make a mirror image if you have a development of condos or something. It will mirror your walls and mirror your cabinets. However, what it does not do, some items in our catalog, we already talked about these, but if I go to an assembly like a box, and I'll pick an FP1 box left that goes on the left end of this cabinet. Now, this box has a near end on one end and then a on it and then a small return on it here. If I do a mirror image of this job, it's not going to know to turn this from a box left into a box right. It's going to maintain a box left. So you'll have some items that don't work very well if you go to this modifications and reverse room. So I really have not used that very much. You're welcome to experiment with it if you want, but most of the time it doesn't do exactly what I would like it to, so I avoid it. So that's the modifications button. The measure tools button will typically look like this little tape measure tool when you first come in. If I just click on that tape measure tool, notice here on the sidebar it gives me some parameters. Anywhere I click on the screen and stick my mouse, notice the blue line and those parameters in the upper left corner, how it changes. I can measure between 2 cabinets this way. It's just like a tape measure on a job. So that's one functionality of this tool. It's picked by clicking on the top half of this tool. If I go to the bottom half of this tool, I change to snap marks instead of measure. So I'm going to change to snap marks. Notice it changed this icon. So now if I click at different places, and see the little red crosshair, if I click in different places, those red crosshairs will stay in place. I can push my tab button, and notice in the upper left-hand corner, I can key into the horizontal. I can tell it to go horizontally 305 millimeters, 12 inches, and I can go vertical 0, and you'll notice how it moves my cursor down in the drawing space. I can also just change my angle. And then if I enter again, it places that line and goes to my next option to place a new snap point. Now, these snap points are used typically for placing walls. Notice I've moved my screen and all those snap snap points disappeared. At the bar screen, we very briefly covered this yesterday, but we have all of our different snap modes down here. If I go to this one, snap to marks, that will turn those marks back on. Now, if I were in my wall mode, I could snap to each of those individual points. You're not going to put walls like that in the middle of a room, but the idea of these is a way to snap floating locations for your walls to be located. Notice now I zoom in and out and those red points. That's because my snap to marks mode is on. If I move my mouse away from it, you should be able to see a little bit of a blue highlight to that tool. If I click on it again, it turns off the blue highlight, turning off the tool. Snap marks also disappear. They're just hidden. Now, if I want to clear them completely, this ruler button will do that. It completely gets rid of all my snap marks. So, snap marks are a good way to place hidden walls. Although yesterday we talked about in the wall mode this construction line. These construction lines I think are a better way of, I can position this wherever I want and then go directly over to my wall mode while I'm here and then position an island wall right off of these construction lines. Then when I exit out of wall mode, those construction lines are gone. So snap points are good if you want them to stay around for a while. Construction lines are better if you want to just locate something and then have your wall drawn and then get rid of the lines. The construction lines are a little easier to use. So this measure tool is fairly commonly used, though, for just measuring spaces between items. Now, one problem with this measure tool is if you'll notice here, if I'm trying to snap onto the side of this cabinet, there's nothing snapping there. It doesn't. If I click, it's going to be zoomed in. It's not exactly on the edge of that cabinet. So I'm going to zoom back out here. If I wanted to measure exactly between two things, there's under snap mode we want to use. Instead of snap to marks this time, I want to use this far one, which is snap to point. And I'm going to click on this, but as I do, watch closely on the cabinets. Notice right now you see all the lines and things that make up this cabinet. But if I click on snap to points, see all the white dots that just showed up. Now those white dots become snap marks. So, and you'll see them on the ends of walls, all of those things. Now I can draw measure tool between any of these points like that. And then it's actually snapping. You'll see as I get close to it, a little white square next to one of those points telling me that it's snapping to them. The disadvantage of this is there's a lot of snap points on some of these. On Hinge, for instance, you'll see all of these snap points. If I go to my elevation view and turn snap to points on, you only see outside points of cabinets, but I see dowel holes and door profiles and hinge cups and all of those things. Even my finished end arrow here has snap points on it, so you have to be a little careful with that tool. The other thing with snap to points is that it's a little hard to see at this point, but it's a little choppy when I zoom in and out. If I turn that off, it's smoother zooming. The more cabinets you have in your job, particularly if you throw in some appliances, a Wolf range, for instance, has hundreds and hundreds of these snap points on it. So the more of these snap points that you have visible, the harder it is to make use of those snap points, and also it makes your screen and your computer run slower. So I leave them off unless I need them. This other snap icon is to snap to the grid. I have not found very many uses for that myself, but in the drawing mode, we'll cover that probably tomorrow. There are good uses for snap to grid in there, but in your model space out here where I'm actually drawing a job, I have never had reason to use the snap to grid, but you can always turn it on and then it's going to snap to grid points, which in my case is just the center, and if I zoom way out, it'll snap to these other grid intersection points, but I'll just leave it off for now. So that is the measure tool and the snap marks. The object tree, we're going to come back to that here in a little bit. That's one of the more complex feature in Cabinavision. We'll briefly cover it today, but not right at this minute. So this is our plan view then. That kind of covers the ribbon bar for plan view. If I switch to my elevation view, you can also not tell that there was any change made up here. They look almost identical, and most of them are, with the exception of this little window right here. In my wall view, my elevation view, in having a room selector here, I've got a wall elevation selector. Notice I've only got one wall selected there. If I go back to the plan and I change these walls back from wall ends, I'll change them to standard walls. If I go back to my elevation, now it says wall number 1 front. If I go back to my plan view real quickly and zoom in, you see this number 1 icon, number 2, so it numbers walls, number 3. If I go to elevation view, this tells me which wall I'm looking at. So wall number 1, wall number 2, wall number 3. So the reason we go to wall ends is to not have all of those walls visible from elevation view to cycle through these. So it only shows me walls that are standard walls, and typically that will be the only ones I have actual cabinets applied to. Now, this icon next to it is my favorite G icon in the whole program. It's really a goofy icon, but it's just a smiley face. We're looking at the face of the guy's head, which means we're looking at the face of this wall. If I come back out to plan, and I'm going to copy and paste this cabinet on the back of this wall and go back to my elevation view, if I click on this wall face or back icon, now we're looking at the back of the guy's bad haircut, and we're looking at the back side of the wall in that cabinet I just placed. So I can look at both front and back elevations of a given wall. Remember, the way that a wall is, the way it determines what is the front and what is the back. If I draw a wall from left to right, the dimensions are on the back. If I draw a wall left, the dimensions are on what Cabinet Vision knows as the back of the wall. This would be the front of this wall. This would be the front of this wall. This would be the back of this wall. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So let me go back to elevation view then. All right, so that's the wall face or back. This next icon has to do with locking of part numbers, and that is visible in either the plan or the elevation view. I typically not had the greatest results out of this. I know that some of you are particular about how things are numbered, and that's okay. You can Cabinet Vision is going to number things automatically, and the way it does that, the sort of numbering strategy it uses is it goes to wall number 1. In this case, there are no cabinets on wall number 1, so it's going to skip and go to wall number 2, where we start with cabinets. Now what it does is starts in the bottom left corner. If you remember yesterday, we talked about the origin point always being in the bottom left corner of a cabinet box. The same thing holds true for a wall. This is the origin point of this wall. Now, the way that Cabinet Vision numbers is it goes to this wall and goes to base cabinets first and goes from left to right. So it's going to number 1, 2, and 3. If I move this FP1 box to the right of cabinet number 3, you'll notice that all of the cabinet numbers rename and keep them in order. This lock feature is so that I've locked down my numbers. Now I can move this up and it will retain part number 3. So that lock feature is for if I unlock, notice stay the same. See what happens if I move this one. There, moving it, it refreshed everything and renumbered. Okay, so that's what the lock feature is for. Just as a side note, if you have ghost items, we talked yesterday about being able to come here to order entry, and I'll type in a BD3 cabinet. I looked through and found that BD3 cabinet. I can size it whatever size I want. Notice it's number 7. If I click in order entry mode, if I need to change the order of part numbers, I can click on a cabinet and drag it up. Now that BD3 became number 5. So I'm not sure how that'll work here if we... Okay, yep, that's what I thought. It won't let us move that actual visual items. Ghost items that can be done with, but not visual items. Visual items, you actually have to move them around on your screen or lock the numbers. Another way to do this, though, is by right-clicking on a cabinet or an assembly and picking properties. And properties, I can here, and there's more we're going to cover in this later on, but right now we'll just talk about part number. I'll change this to whatever number I want. I can call it number 99. Now, by me manually putting in a number, notice this lock number box, I could check that right now and it would lock this cabinet to number 99, but I'm not going to check it right now. If I manually put in a number and hit OK, by default that will check the lock box. It's already checked here for me because I manually overrode it. Notice now I can't click in that cell. If I came to another cabinet later and tried to number this cabinet, the same number, number 99, and said OK, it says it's already locked. So it won't allow me to overwrite cabinets that way. We'll go ahead and just delete this one that threw the number on. So that's the lock feature. The rest of these numbers are pretty much the same. The exception of in the modifications tool, you'll notice you can't center the room because I'm not looking at the room here. It will only allow me to copy or delete rooms from this view. So, but everything else from this view is exactly the same. So look to the 3D mode. We kind of talked about this, being able to maneuver around in your screen and plan or elevation. Again, zoom with your mouse, center mouse button, and hold is pan. View is the exact same kind of controls. In 3D, they work similarly, but a little bit different. My scroll wheel is a zoom. You'll notice, too, on the zoom, where my cursor goes, zoom in, it zooms in on that point of the room. So if I want to look really close at this toe kick, I can just hold my cursor there and zoom right in on that toe kick. I've got a little bit of choppiness here as I zoom in and out. If I go back to my wireframe mode, it's much faster zooming. 3D mode is where you really start to notice this slowdown. Especially if I go to texture mode, you'll notice I have a fun texture on my drawer fronts here. I'll just right now. When we set up this room, I did not specify wood or finish or anything like that. I just bypassed all of those settings, right? So if I back out here to plan and go to back to my catalog and see what I selected for my doors, what's going to happen here is I have alder selected for my base cabinets. I have knotty walnut selected for my drawer fronts. So the reason that I can tell that is because of that textured mode. So if I go here and let's say what I really wanted was cherry for all of these. So cherry, and technically I should make all of these pearls match as well. So I'll pick cherry here for my upper cabinets, and then I hit finish. Now if I go back to my texture mode in 3D, notice it jumped right to texture mode. Whatever render mode I've used last on that particular view, so in this case 3D view, it saves that mode. So it keeps me in texture mode. Now you'll notice that those drawer fronts look the same as the other parts. So I used the texture mode to verify that all of my drawer fronts looked the same. I can see the edge profiles and stuff without the textures turned on, but I can't tell what wood it is. There are textures assigned to every wood species, and you will be able to see a difference between most of them visually in here if you've got something entered incorrectly. So I'm going to go back to the wireframe mode to make this run a little bit faster. But in 3, again, your mouse wheel zooms on wherever your cursor is. If I click in the middle of my screen, just left click and hold, I can pan my camera around in 3D. I can look down on the cabinets. Sometimes on islands I've found it useful to look right up underneath the toe kick area to see if I've got a conflict in how some cabinets' recessed toes are coming together. So that's really, really handy. I can also, in 3D mode, you'll notice the ribbon bar is slightly different up here now. 3D mode, I can click on this window. Right now I'm on rotate mode, so that's how left clicking and rotating around. If I change to the move button, if I left click, it's just going to pan my screen around. Bird's eye will just do just that. It goes right up to the bird's eye view of the kitchen. It still is, if I go to rotate mode, I can still pan this around and see it however I want to see it. Enhance mode, I typically don't mess with that too much. If you're doing some realistic rendering and things, that's where this would come into play. I just clicked on it and it went pretty quick. It'll get rid of some of these, it'll anti-alias things, get rid of this choppiness of the lines sometimes. So take a step back here to the layers. The render mode and the window mode are the same as what we've shown in the other views. The layers mode is just the same as other views also. So I have different layers for, I can go to a low detail, for instance, and it gets rid of all of, you see the handle holes that we cut in the top of our cabinets, the hardware, all of those things disappear on different modes if I look at it in different layers. So layer pretty much the same. Notice on the 3D mode, I'm back to having a room selector, whereas in the elevation mode, had a wall elevation selector rather than a room mode. In 3D, it's a room mode again. So you do not have the modification or any of these other tools. You can measure something in 3D. It's a three-dimensional drawing. It's not a true isometric drawing where you can, like old school drafting principles, where you could still have measurements and things off of it. The vanishing point, and so things don't look. You can't measure anything in a perspective type view, so that's why there aren't any of those tools. Now, this window is something different for 3D mode, though, and we'll cover this more tomorrow. But while we're talking about it, we might as well cover this. So I can around, pan, scroll, tilt my camera, all of those things in my 3D mode. This is to save a camera. Notice there's nothing in this drop-down list right now. These arrows do nothing if I click on them. Lock orientation doesn't even allow me to do anything. If I click on this item here, though, edit camera. Let's see. No, actually, that's not even it. If I right-click in the background here and say Save Camera, I can name this whatever I want. I'll just leave it called Camera 1 for right now and say OK. Now, on this drop-down list, now I can pick Camera 1 and lock orientation becomes available. Notice I can't. I'm trying to spin around here in 3D. I can't do anything until I unlock that orientation. Now I can spin it, look at it from whatever angle I want. If I want to go back to that view, I can go back to Camera 1 and it locks. The nice thing about this camera lock, that this is a new feature in version 8 that we've never had access to, is, and we haven't talked about CAD at all, we'll cover that tomorrow, but just to give you a quick teaser on it, when I have a locked camera view, I can access CAD mode now. So before I could only access CAD mode in plan or elevation. Now I can come in here and put leaders on CADs in 3D and text out here in 3D and stuff. Now, that can all be to drawings, and I can note where rollout trays are, or trash bins, or do a explode view of my crown profile or something like that. There's all kinds of things in CAD mode that we can talk about tomorrow that you can do from this view. But the nice thing is that it stays locked here because I've got a locked camera angle. Now notice if I uncheck this, CAD line disappears. So now I can zoom around and do whatever else I want to do, but I can also always go back to Camera 1 and my CAD lines stay there, whatever I've done. It saves it for this plane of view. So that's a really handy tool in 3D. And again, we have object tree, which we'll come back to here in a few minutes again. At this, is there any questions that anybody has? If you do, just write a quick in the chat window. We'll just give you an option to have any questions answered if I went too fast over something. All right, I'm not anything there. So, all right, so that's the 3D view then. Let's go to the reports view. Again, our rib bar is slightly different up here. Depending on what you're after, most of the time for my reports view, I access very little from this ribbon bar. The view really cut list, this will give you a list of all the parts and pieces. Notice cabinet vision, every unfinished end, the tops, even down to how many shelf pins there are, different kinds of shelf pins. There's hinge plates. Cavision accounts for all of these parts. This is where we get our manufacturing information from. You probably won't have any real reason to ever look at that. Your materials tab will kind of give you a quantity and how much each of those kind of items cost, a relative pricing kind of a thing. So if you were wondering between two items, you could change from cherry doors to alder doors and see what it changed this materials cost to, but you probably don't care too much about the materials cost as you do the final selling price. So likely you'll only ever really use the order button here, which is the default. So window mode, same as before. Set columns. Some of you want to customize this. You can turn off different column headers that you see here by just checking this box or unchecking this box. You can also, from this view, change the order they show in by just clicking on one header and dragging. I've set up most of your computers in the same layout that you see here on this screen, but you can customize it however you want. It's up to you. So that's what set columns is for. In the reports view, use layers, although layers in the reports view really does nothing because it stays the same. The kitchen view, or the room view here, I can still cycle through different rooms in my reports view and see the different items that make up those rooms. That functions the same. I can also add rooms, but there is no modification, so I can't copy or center rooms from this reports view. I can access my job specifications or my room, both the room names or room notes. I can also access the catalog to do different options or specifications, and then your help menu. If I go to order entry, these are exactly the same, so it doesn't matter if I'm in the reports view or the reports view and order entry. You still have those same settings. Let's see. Just really quickly, we'll cover this more in depth tomorrow, but just to answer these quick questions on this, your drawings tab is the last view we'll talk about. Notice nothing here right now. This is when we get into CAD mode. This is where you'll do all of your printing to paper from. Notice there's nothing here right now. Just to give you a quick demonstration of it, the way that drawings page works is that I'm going to come out to whatever view I want and take a snapshot of it. So I right-click and say to drawing. Now it makes a drawing of this item. What I've done there is made what's called a scene, it's just a stick snapshot of my screen. If I go to elevation, I can do the same thing. Right-click to drawing. I can do the same thing in my 3D mode. It's going to second here to render. It's removing overlapped lines. You'll see here. We'll talk about this more tomorrow. If I now go to 3D and put it in whatever view I want to show my client, I can say to drawing. So there, it's rendered it. Now I go back to my drawings mode. Still nothing showing on the screen, but I do have available scenes now. So I can click on each of these. It brings up a quick preview there in that yellow screen of what that item is, because sometimes I'll have a big list of views here. I can drag that out into my paper space, and I can put multiple scenes on the same paper space. Before I talked about the grid, not ever using it. This is a situation where I do like the grid, because I can come in here and I like my grid set pretty tight in my drawing space, because I can click on this scene now and move my reference point so that I line up my plan elevation view, for instance. This one's not cooperating very well right now, but you get the you'll be able to line these drawings up with each other and make it look more professional. In the drawings mode, we'll also be able to do title blocks, and there's lots and lots of things we can do here, and we'll cover more of that tomorrow. For now, I'm going to remove these scenes. Just quick, the more of these scenes you have in there, the bigger your file size will get. If I were to save this job with lots of drawings versus no drawings in it, the lots of drawings one, it's drastically bigger file size. So a large job cabinets with no drawings in it is actually a fairly small file, but a small job of cabinets with lots of drawings gets to be a really big file. So that's the drawings page, and the toolbar up here is very different too, but we'll cover most of that tomorrow. We won't spend much on it today at all. I want to get back to these other modes and talk about the object tree. The object tree is probably one of the most advanced sort of features in Cabinet Vision. I clicked on it and it opened on my other monitor, so I'll slide it over here onto this monitor so you can see it. There will be very few times that you'll need to access the object tree, but there are some applications for it, and so I want to give you a brief run review of the object tree and how it functions. But before we do that, there's a couple of principles we need to understand first. And there's two principles that I want to talk to you about. The first one is object hierarchy in Cabinet Vision. The second one is your coordinate parameter system. This little ECS window you see down here that will give you different X and Z coordinates. So let's talk about hierarchy first. in Cabinet Vision, there is a hierarchy of how things are related to each other. For instance, the first step in the hierarchy is the system. So most of the system settings are dictated by our catalog. And the construction methods, the types of woods, the databases that store all of this information is system settings. System settings will not be anything you'll ever have to or even know anything about them. Just so that in the background there's overriding system settings that affect everything downstream from the system. So the next step in the hierarchy is the job. So this job, when I created a new job, it adopts all of the rules that are set up for the system. So the job is one step down in this hierarchy. Job is the room level. So every in this room adopts what we have for this job. In this case, in a modular catalog, the only really thing we adjust in a job window is the job name. So essentially, room is the top level as far as what most of you will be concerned. The room is the highest step you'll really need to go to. Just below that, kind of a minor step, is the wall level. So within a room, there are multiple walls. These walls have reference. If I click on them, you'll notice start X and Y and end X and Y. Those are in relation to the room. Now the room, we'll talk about what X, Y, and Z mean here in a minute, but the room coordinate system based on this grid in the center of your screen, this point here in the center is the 0, 0, 0 point. So any of these, the walls in this room are related to, so they're one step down the hierarchy from the room level. So walls are the next step down. The next step down from that is the cabinet level. Okay, so this cabinet is related to this wall. It knows when I click on this cabinet, it is 726 millimeters, or right over here, away from the end position of this wall that's within this room, that's within this job, that's within the vision system. So we'll see how that works. Within the cabinet, there are more steps, and both of these steps I'll just briefly show you, but you probably won't have to do much of this at times as you use the program. Very few of you will ever access this feature, but they're also down in past the cabinet level. There is the part level, so I can select just the top of this cabinet. There's notice coordinates, things over here. It tells me the size of these cabinets. These are handy for you if you ever need to go back and order an adjustable shelf for a cabinet. You can come in here and click on that adjustable shelf, and it tells you exactly how big it is, we would have made it, and you could order a new shelf by that size, for instance. So that is the part level. Now, the next level down from that, and this is a level that none of you will ever access because your systems do not have this S2M center buttons back here to the cabinet level. The part level, we're on the level right now. I can right-click on a part and say edit that part only. Now I can see that partition. Now this is the part level. If I look here though, there's a bunch of text showing me where each of these dowel holes and my shelf pin holes and my adjustable shelf pin holes, all the hinge plate holes, all of that stuff is located at. So this is the operation level. So again, this is not something you'll ever affect here. This affects our CNC machine, so it's pretty well locked down in the system. You can't very much affect any of those things. We'll back and talk here a little more about the cabinet level here in just a second. But what's important to remember about this hierarchy is that if a rule is set in higher up the hierarchy level, it will affect everything below that level. So for instance, if I make a room level change to my wood, and I change this to, let's pick cherry natural maple, I've just made a room level change to these cabinets. That will affect everything from the room level on downstream. So it affects the walls, it affects the cabinets, it affects the parts, and it affects the operations. All I changed was cherry, so really what it affects is the part level. It will change the parts from that were before some custom wood, or they were alder or hickory or whatever it was. Now I've changed those parts to be cherry. So that sounds like kind of a no-brainer, simple concept, but it's really important to remember that if I make a room level change, it affects everything downstream, not upstream. The way to remember this kind of you think of the United States, and we have the country as a whole, we have individual states, we have individual counties and individual cities. If there's a federal law, it will affect all of us. If there's a state law, it will affect us in Utah, but not necessarily you in Nevada or Colorado. If there's a county law, it might affect me in Utah County, but not people in Salt Lake County. So then down to the municipal level on a city kind of level. Hopefully that makes sense. So everything downstream is affected by whatever the trumping power, whoever trumps that comes in more powerful, and their rules or laws overriding else. Now there's an exception to that though in cabinet vision. That's if I do an override. So on a cabinet, for instance, if I want to have a run of cabinets on one cabinet, say I wanted a built-in chair that I wanted it to be a inset face frame, but everything else is a Eurobox. I can do that in cabinet vision just fine. But my room is going to be set as a Eurobox. But I override this one. Let's do this cabinet. I'm going to change it to a beaded inset face frame. So to do cabinet level override, rather than come here to the room options, I want to go to the cabinet and go pretties. And then on cabinet, I have an options and a door tab. I have options here into case layout, and we'll pick a beaded inset and say OK. Now notice I have a beaded inset face frame on this cabinet now. I do not have that on any of the others. That's because this is a cabinet level override. If I change the room now to something else, let's say we change the room, instead of a bead inset, let's say we change the whole room to a square inset. So we'll frames pop here on all the cabinets, right? So it looks like everything is okay. The problem is that notice this cabinet has a square face frame. The cabinet on this end has a square face frame. There's no bead inside, just the door and the face frame. But this cabinet maintained the bead. The reason for that is this cabinet had an override placed on it. So overrides will overrule anything up the stream from it. So you have to be careful if you ever make a cabinet level override and then later go back and make a room level change. Wherever you overrides, they do not accept the room level changes. Hopefully that makes sense. That's to be really, really important, and we'll show you this here in a while today when we section doors. I'm going to go back here to my case layout and change back to a Eurobox. I'll just really quickly. If I were to go in and make a cut of this cabinet, and for whatever reason I came in here to this cabinet level and wanted to change my drawer front from a block front, I'm going to change it to a 5-piece front. I don't know, I think we were Avondale or Amherst. I'll pick an Amherst flat panel. So cherry with a number 1 edge. So I've selected a wood, an outside edge profile, and a door style for this drawer front. I can do that and change that drawer front. Now I've got a 5-piece drawer front instead of a block front. That's fun to do. I changed that to cherry. I think I had my room set as cherry doors. So if I come back in here now and go to doors and I say, oh, I want to change, my room just changed from cherry to walnut. So I change everything to walnut. By the way, you'll notice sometimes these are not in alphabetical order. That's a cabinet vision thing. I wish there was a way we could change that, but there's not. So I'm going to change all of these to walnut though. And finish. Now when I go to 3D mode, if I go to texture, we should see this. Okay, so what happened here, you notice this one drawer front has slightly different texture to it. What happened here was that we overrode, the room selection was a block front. we changed it to be a 5-piece front, but then later down the road, the client came back and revised the order and said, no, we want to change to walnut, not cherry. Well, this drawer front that I put an override on keeps its override. That we've killed the intelligence of that item because it's a cabinet level or a drawer front level override. It maintains whatever we overrode it to, regardless of what happens in the higher up levels, the cabinet level or the room level. So that's important to understand, that any override I make will stick. It won't go away until I clear that cabinet out. So I'm just going to delete that cabinet for now. So the hierarchy, setting in cabinet vision. The next principle is the X and Y coordinate system. So we had to do an audience participation here. I want everybody to hold their hand out in front of them with their palm. Your right hand has to be your right hand with your palm facing towards you. And I want to extend your index finger up with your thumb pointing to your right and your middle finger pointing back towards yourself. This is what cabinet vision refers to as the right hand rule. Your finger now and your thumb represent different axes in 3 dimensions. So notice here at the bottom corner of my screen, you see that the red, green, and blue icon there. As I move my screen around, you see that coordinate system moving. So with the right hand rule, your thumb represents the x-axis, the y is your index finger, and the z is your middle finger, right? So there are 9 basic parameters that we're going to have to remember with respect to those. Really, you may use. The other 3 you probably won't ever use, but you need to understand that they exist. So the first set of parameters that we'll talk about is x, y, and z. So x, y, and z refer to distance in relate to the x-axis. So the cabinet, remember in the hierarchy, it's attached to this wall. So this cabinet is 1,400 millimeters in the x direction, positive on this wall. If I go to elevation view and click on one of these cabinets, in y direction, if you're using your right hand rule, in y, up and down your index finger is sitting at the very bottom, so it's at the 0 point, so its elevation is 0. If I changed its elevation, say, to 500, is 500 positive in the y direction. If I change an outset figure, and then we'll call it 100, I've outset that cabinet from the wall 100 millimeters in the z direction. You'll see this now in my plan view. It's out in z. Okay, so y and z refer to where that object is related or is located in relation to the next object upstream in the hierarchy, up the food chain. Okay, so that's x, y, and z. So we'll come back to this here in just a second. Now, this cabinet, we're going to change the next set of parameters. In this cabinet, we want to change the dx, dy, and dz. The dx, dy, and dz refers to the size of this cabinet. So the dx of this cabinet is its width. The x dimension is the width of this cabinet, the cabinet level to illustrate this. By the way, if anybody's ever wondering if you're on the cabinet level or the room level, it's pretty easy. I get this question fairly commonly, but if I see walls or I see multiple cabinets, I'm room level. If I only see one cabinet, I'm on the cabinet level. So, we'll talk over the phone. Sometimes I'll say, go to the cabinet level and go to this tab and do this. And we'll talk about this because notice there's different tools on my ribbon bar also for this view, as there will be for each of these 3 views and my 3D view. On the cabinet level, it's different, but we'll talk about that here in a little while. Hopefully we'll have time. In cabinet level, though, again, we see the XYZ coordinates here. There we see them if I spin the cabinet this way. So a dx is the dimension in x, meaning the width of this cabinet. So the dx of this cabinet is the inches, or 762 millimeters. The dy is the height, or 880 millimeters, or 34 5/8, right? The Z dimension, the DZ then, is the depth of this cabinet, 24 inches, 610 millimeters. Notice on our cabinets that the doors are proud of that. That's a important thing to pay attention to. So that's gotten some people into trouble before. Your cabinet depth is case only. It's a Eurobox. Your door stick proud of the Eurobox. So this is your DZ. This is DY. This is X dimension. Okay, so the one is in relation to the rotation of these cabinets. Now, remember yesterday we talked about this rotate handle. If I rotate this cabinet, I have rotated around the y-axis. So I have changed the AY parameter. If your right hand rule, rotating around the AY parameter would be like your hand if your index finger were the axis. If you want to rotate something in the x-axis, the AX is rotating around your thumb as an axis. Rotating around the Z, the parameter. So if I go to this cabinet here, for instance, and tell it to rotate to 45 degrees, if I did it in the plan view or elevated, it's not going to let me rotate that way. I'd have to do that from the object tree, so we'll show you that here in just a second. But the AX and AZ are almost never used, but I want you to recognize that they are there. This one we rotated around the y-axis. So now I'm going to show you the object tree for both of these principles to make sense. If I'm on room level, the object tree will show everything in this room on downstream. If I'm on the cabinet level and I go to object tree, it only shows this cabinet and everything downstream from it. So let's start in the room level and I'll show you how it works. Object tree, room level, I open up that, it goes down a step in the hierarchy down to walls. So within those walls, I have wall number 1, wall number 2, and wall number 3. So wall number 2, I know had cabinets on it. Talk about face and back being different steps in the hierarchy, but as far as the object tree is concerned, it does treat them as different type things. So I know that these cabinets are placed on the front face of wall number 2 within the kitchen room. So open up the front face. Now I see the 2 cabinets I've got placed in here. If I go down, I can drill way down in each of these cabinets. I can go to the case parts, to the unfinished left end, and see every dowel hole that's in here. Every part in Cabinet Vision is given a line in this object, and every operation on that part is given. These have some just dozens. Some of them you may have hundreds and hundreds of parameters on one cabinet box. You never really need to get in and edit these parameters, but just so that you understand each of these parameters, explain to Cabinet Vision how a cabinet is put together. Let's pick up here first on the room, and we'll look at just this cabinet. So if I click on this cabinet, and remember we're on, let's see, the BD1, so I think it's this one right here, but this one's a 534 millimeter wide one, so we'll find out. So I'm going to scroll down the parameters and find the DX parameter wrong. It's this cabinet we're looking at. So 762 millimeters wide is this cabinet. I could look up here. There's one parameter we didn't talk about, cabinet number, cabno. It's number 2 on this one. So it kind of, the sequence you show up in the object tree is somewhat arbitrary, so you never quite know which one you're looking at, so you need to confirm that. But this one then is this rotated cabinet. So if I look at my 62, so that's the width of this cabinet is 762 millimeters. DY is 880, which is my height. The DZ is 610, which is the depth. If you look at the X, Y, and Z parameters, this is in relation up one step of the tree to the front face of wall number 2, right? So the cabinet's origin point is 2,004 millimeters away from the origin point of this wall. In Y it's 0 and in Z it's 0 because it's on the ground and it's touching the wall. Now if I go to this cabinet, let's look at it on its DX, DY, and DZ 534. So we know that's this cabinet in width. It's 880 high and 610 deep. But if I scroll the bottom in X, Here I noticed the 1400 millimeters away from the origin point of the wall. Y, remember we floated that 500 millimeters up off the floor, so that's our Y, 500 millimeters. Z is 100, that's how far in Z we are off of the wall. Now if I back up here and look at I got to find them on here, AX, AY, and AZ, notice on this cabinet it's all zeros, because this cabinet's sitting in its standard orientation. If I go to this cabinet though, and go to the X, notice I'm rotated minus 41 degrees. That's around the Y-axis, around my middle, or my index finger, I've rotated in the AY negative, or clockwise, 41 degrees. So how the object tree works. It sounds really complex. Most of the time you won't really access anything in here. However, every once in a while you'll have a time Cabinet Vision won't want to move two cabinets side by side. It'll be telling you that it can't because there's not enough space for two objects to occupy the same space or something. It happens. You can always go to the object tree to that cabinet. For instance, this one is this angled cabinet here. I go to let's change a couple of things in here. My DX, I'm going to double click it and change this to 914, which is 3 feet in DX, which is the width of my cabinet. So I've changed this cabinet from 30 inches to 36 inches, so it's going to get wider. I'm also going to, just to illustrate this, going to change my X dimension. And here I'm going to go less than this. I'm going to change this down to, let's say, 2000. That's going to put me 500 millimeters closer. This gap right here is less than 500 millimeters. If I did that on the room, it might yell at me and tell me I can't do it. But in the object tree, it will allow it. So I'm going to put OK here. And then I'm also going to find my rotate values. So X minus 140 or minus 41. I'm going to change that to minus 60. So if I hit OK, nothing's happened here. That's because I haven't hit OK in the object tree. So what's going to happen here is when I push OK, this cabinet's going to get wider, it's going to rotate a little bit steeper, and it's going to move into this side cabinet. So if I hit OK, it'll for a second. Now everything I've just told it to. So obviously you can't do this physically, but that's the point, is that sometimes Cabinet Vision will want to tell you something can't be done when you know it can in reality. So you can use the object tree to override automatic settings. The automatic settings are really nice most of the time. It gets really frustrating if it allows you to move something into the position you want it to move. So the object tree is super powerful for being able to do that stuff. I'm going to delete this cabinet so we can get back. In fact, I'll delete them both so we can start over here. So that's the object tree. Object tree, those 9 basic parameters, X, Y, Z, DX, DY, DZ, and AX, AY, and AZ, plus the hierarchy in Cabinet Vision are concepts that you don't really use on a daily basis, but it's important to recognize how they function so that you can make Cabinet Vision do what you want it to do. Let me show you one quick example of that. There's some nice things you can do in Cabinet Vision. We'll go here and place another cabinet on the screen. Remember we put a trash pull-out. In fact, let's use a trash cabinet. I'm going to come back in here to the objects to a door mount accessory cabinet, single door. Let's make it 18 inches wide. Now, I could come in here and put 0 clearance on this wall and then divide by 2 to center that. So I can use my mathematical formulas in here to center things. But it's one-time calculation. If I change the width of this wall, this cabinet will no longer be centered on the wall. Sometimes you'll have need to change a cabinet with an appliance or a slot in it. I'm going to show you two instances here. Question yesterday about centering sinks on windows. I'll show you a couple of options you have here using this principle of the object tree and formulas. So if I come to the cabinet, and I'm going to go to the cabinet level on this cabinet to face view so I can put on a subassembly. I'm going to go to my accessories, and let's find us a trash bin. I'm going to put the same one on that we did yesterday. This is one I like the most. So note, I just snapped it in there. It's not really centered or anything like that, but I could center it. I could do the math and say, well, it's 457 on the cabinet. My trash bin is 380. 381 wide, I could do the math and find out that that's really 38 millimeters from the side to center that cabinet. However, sometimes that cabinet might move. Most of you won't ever use a formula to place this. You'll just put it in there. But I want you to see that it can be done. So what I'm going to do is go to this trash pullout, and instead of, notice X, Y, and Z, dy, dx, dz. So X, Y, and Z are my relative location of the trash bin container with respect to the next step up the hierarchy, or this cabinet container. So it's telling me I'm 30 millimeters away from the left side, the left, right, X. Again, you see it down here in this icon. I'm 129.25 up from the bottom, and I'm 0 in from the back. So if I go to 3D, I see that trash bin clear at the back of the cabinet. In fact, it's overlapping the actual back of my cabinet, so it wouldn't really ride like that. But anyway, I'm going to come here and pick this trash bin, and I'm going to build a formula into this cell. And almost never will you use formulas from a design standpoint, but there's one formula that it would be well if you wrote down and remembered, and that's this formula I'm going to show you right now. Now, remember the object tree, we can down to different levels. In the object tree, this trash pullout is one step down from the cabinet. So that's important in how we write this formula. So what I'm going to do is, in this left-right formula, I'm going to click on this little ... box. It's going to bring up this parameter edit window. Now from this window, I just want to click on equation. Instead of value, I want an actual equation in here. So what I want to do is make this trash bin always centered in this cabinet. So what I can do to make this happen is, I want to say the width divided by 2 will give me the center of this cabinet, and then subtract half of the width of this trash pullout. It will put this trash pullout in the correct place. So the formula that I want you to write down or remember is colon dx divided by 2 minus dx divided by 2. Let me explain what that means. Remember, I'm selecting a parameter, a left-right x parameter for the trash pullout. The dx of this trash pullout is 381. That's represented here by this dx. So I'm saying half of that width of that trash pullout. I'm going to subtract that from the colon dx divided by 2. Look similar. The colon represents going up the object tree one step. So I want to go up one step from the trash bin. So I'm saying the width of the cabinet, the colon dx, divided by 2 is half of the width of this cabinet, minus the dx, or the width of the trash bin, divided by 2. So if I hit OK on this, it doesn't look like anything changed. I still 38 millimeters in this window. But what's cool is now I can come out here and let's say I later change the width of this cabinet. So my trash bin stayed centered in that cabinet. It bases everything off of that formula. If I go back here and select the trash bin, now I'm at 193. 767 divided by 2 minus 381 divided by 2 will equal 193. That formula sticks. So again, most of you won't use formulas for things like that, but I want you to see that it's possible. I do a couple of users in Cabinet Vision that do this kind of thing to some parts. I've had people make very complex bunk beds, and they're setting up formulas like that in their parts and pieces. Most designers aren't going to want to take the time to set those up, but I want you to see that it can be done. There is one other application for this with sinks that I do want to show you. It came up yesterday about centering sinks on windows, and I didn't know the answer, so I looked it up. Let's see, we're going to go here and place a window on the wall, and we'll put it down to countertop level or something. And let's go a little bit from that. I'm going to go and find myself a sink that I want to use. I'm going to go to plumbing fixtures, and to sinks, let's pick some Kohler sink here. This is a double. So I'm going to take this out and drop it on. If I place it right here, doesn't really do anything. It lets me place it wherever I want. If I put it over here under the sink, notice that it asks me center sink under window. I can say yes. So that will center the sink under the window. Now if I move this window, oh, it didn't actually move this. If I move that over slightly, let's see when it asks me. So it looks like when I'm about halfway onto this window, then it's going to ask me again, and it can ask me to recenter. So that, I think, answers your question yesterday about how to center the sinks on the wall. Now if we're to grab a sink cabinet, we'll go here, cabinets and a BSF, 2-door and a false front, and I'm going to put this over here that doesn't ask me anything. If I make that, say, 33 inches wide, 838, expands and still doesn't ask me anything. But if I move that over underneath that sink, now it's going to ask me, do I want to center the sink cabinet under the sink? So that just did that for me. Now, this is one way to do it. Now I can change the elevation of that sink to make it drop down. I'll show you another application for a formula here. This is just math that we'll do right in this cell. I know my cabinet is 880 millimeters tall, but I'm trying to figure out where to put this sink cabinet, or this sink actual plumbing fixture. So what I want to do is in my elevation, I'm going to type in 880, which is the height of my cabinet. So from the top of my cabinet, I want to, remember, we're looking at the origin point of the sink. So if I just 880, it will snap the top of this sink right to the top of my cabinet, but I want to sink the sink down into the cabinet, right? So I'm going to come here and say, instead of 880, I'm going to now, the thickness of my countertop, let's say it's a 3 cm top, and then I'm going to subtract the height of my sink, which is shown right here, 284.162. Now if I do that, still say yes, centered under the window, that allows for a 30 millimeter countertop. The countertop will flush right out of the top of this. So typically you're going to want to be just a little bit higher. So let's say 1/4 inch up. So now if I were to put a countertop out of my jaw level in my drawings, I would see a countertop come just underneath this sink lip. So that's placing a sink in here using some of those centering and our XY coordinates and stuff. Now there's one other way to place a sink, and this is how I typically place the sink in it, is I actually go to the cabinet level. So I'll come in here and browse to my appliances or plumbing fixtures, and I'll pick a sink, and oops, let's go back to that exact same sink we were just using, and I'll place it on here. Now I can do the same thing in here with that up-down dimension. I can say 880 plus a 3 cm top. Let's see, miss the, where are we? For the DY is 284.162. It says just below where I'm at right now in the right here. And then add a 1/4 inch into that to sit right above the countertop. So that puts it in right there. But this cabinet isn't big enough to hold this sink, right? So I'm going to have to change it. So rather than change the width of the cabinet and then come back in here, I'm going to go to the left-right position of this sink now and use that equation I just used. The colon dx, the width of the cabinet divided by 2, minus the dx, or the width of the sink, divided by 2. Okay, so now centered in this cabinet. The nice thing about doing that method is that now I can come out here and resize my cabinet. My sink always stays centered in my cabinet. And when I move my cabinet, the sink moves with it. It's totally up to you. If you like the functionality of centering a sink under a window where it automatically does that, you can place the sink on the room level. If you like to be able to center the cabinet or the sink inside the cabinet and move your cabinet or resize your cabinet, then you can place the sink as a subassembly on the cabinet level and put a formula in. You can do whatever you like. Doesn't really matter, but that gives you an idea on how these parameters can be used. Here. All right, so that covers a lot of the heavy stuff that we want to do today. So I want to show a few other things that we not talk about. I didn't have time to talk about yesterday too. So one thing with your units, we talked about being able to switch between inches or millimeters or be able to change your precision of whatever unit you've selected. Notice in my system I've got it showing dual dimensions. I like to see both of them. I know that for client renderings you may or may not want to show that. Change this, you can't change anything from down here. This is just telling me what my primary unit. If I change from millimeters to inches, for instance, inches just move to the outside, millimeters move to the inside. That's really changing for me. Now, if I want to change that to only show an individual unit, I would come here to the solid button and to the preferences button. Under preferences, we will go to format, and under format we have dimension format. So you've got multiple options here. You can do just an individual unit or an individual number, or you can show the unit symbol, the millimeters or the inch symbol afterwards. You can show dual dimensions with no units, or you can show dual dimensions with their units. So and that would change. So if I go to this one here and say OK, now I just see millimeters. Now if I change to inches, I only see inches, only see millimeters. So like I said, I like mine set with dual dimensions. I think it's good for as far as training wheels, for those that are just learning millimeters. For those that have used millimeters, it's very easy to get comfortable with it, and you'll actually, I think most of you will find that millimeters are really nice. They're a lot easier than dealing with 16ths and 30/2 of an inch. So anyway, so I click Set as System Defaults. Whatever I want my system to have, I click Set as System Defaults and hit OK. So I've got that setting changed. Now that can be at any time. You can draw it in millimeters or inches, change halfway through. I know some people like to draw the walls in inches, then convert to millimeters to put their cabinets on walls, that kind of thing. Would encourage everybody, really strongly encourage everybody to learn millimeters, though. You'll find that it's faster, it's easier to calculate things, all of that. If you need to do inches, one thing you can do, for instance, drawing walls, if I want to put 8 feet in here, 96 inches as a wall measurement, but drawing in millimeters to learn how this works, I can start drawing a wall, and 96 inches, this is another number to remember here, is 25.4. That's your conversion factor for those that don't know. If I take that 96 inches and I put a multiply by 25.4, right there in the length cell right here, and then enter, it figured out what my millimeter, it did the math, the conversion in there, in that cell for me. So that's a way to draw in millimeter, but be able to put your, use your inches, what you're used to, in the process of doing it. That can be done on cabinets or walls. Any of them can be, that math can be done. So the width in inches times 25.4. But again, encourage everybody to try their best to draw in inches, in millimeters. The issues here in converting things left being imperial or metric. If I get a cabinet box and drop it on my screen, inches is a good one, but it just happens to convert exactly to 534 millimeters. 10 millimeters, it converts exactly on. But if I were to take and switch to inches, looks like I've got 20 inches. But if I keep this cabinet, let's put a new one in. Right, 21, 534, just like we had before. But now I'm going to tell it to be 24 inches. Notice my millimeter doesn't round quite the same. I'm off by 0.4 of a millimeter. That's really insignificant. You're talking a few pieces of paper thickness. Doesn't sound like a great big deal. The problem with that is that the cap box is fine. Our CNC machines cut out all of our case parts, and it can go down to thousandths of an inch and be just fine. The problem gets come to play when we talk about solid wood parts like doors or drawer boxes. Those parts are cut by a person reading a tape measure, and so it gets very difficult. For instance, on this, and if I go here to the cabinet level and click on that door, I see over here my X and Y, or DX, DY, the size of those cabinets, right? In inches, that looks just fine. Get back over to millimeters. notice my width is a fractional millimeter. Our lists are going to round that up to 302. There's nobody can read 301.8 on their tape measure, so we round that to 302. If it's 301.4, it's going to drop down to 301. The problem is that sometimes that can bite you. You might end up having some bigger gaps where you don't want them. And so rather than have to make a judgment call of how to round something, I just think to use whole number millimeter increments. Now, thing with this, let me show you the difference between a single and a double door cabinet. A double door cabinet, 229 millimeters, is just fine. That door is 225 millimeters, or 8 7/8, right? That's just fine for me to do a whole millimeter increment, meaning not a fractional. There's no decimal after this. Notice our reveals are 2 millimeters on each side. On a double door cabinet, it's 2 millimeters in the center also. Let me go to this cabinet and show that. 2 millimeter gaps plus 300 millimeter doors in this case. So I can do that by saying 610 millimeters minus 2, minus 2, minus 2. Divide that by 2 gives me 2 independent doors at 302 millimeters. So the math is really easy to do in the case. But let's say I need a cabinet that's 611 millimeters. What happens here is those doors now become fractional millimeters. In this case, it goes to 302.5. The math adds up to 611 if I add all these numbers up. The problem is that our cut list is going to make these 303. So I've all of a sudden, between the two of these doors, I've gained a millimeter door size, which means I've lost a millimeter in gap between doors. So the point is that we want to stick to whole numbers, no fractional millimeters if possible. But in single door applications, any whole number is fine. In double door applications, we want to stick to even numbers, not just whole numbers, but even numbered millimeter increments, if at all possible. That's not always. This is one of those rules that can be bent or broken. But it is important to recognize that you order this at 611, we're going to have to do some door rounding, and in order to do that, you may or may not get the exact reveals you want. So for those reasons, I would really strongly encourage everybody to try their best to learn millimeters, and this new feature in Cabinet Vision to show dual dimensions is very handy with being able to do that. So that are units that we didn't get to talk about yesterday. Now, I did want to talk about cabinet sectioning. We'll kind of give this as much justice as we can. I think we've got about, 15 more minutes or so. So we'll just pretty briefly today. We may have to pick up tomorrow and get deeper into this. When it comes to sectioning cabinets, the default cabinet that you pick, a BD1 to start with. Drawer front. Our top drawers come in by default as a certain height. Let's go ahead and just make this 30 inches wide. And I'm going to come to my elevation view. Let's say I wanted to change how this cabinet was configured, either the size of the drawer front or what side the cabinet. I want to add roll-out trays or additional shelves, anything like that is all done using the method we're going to talk about. And this is called sectioning a cabinet. So there's two ways you can do this. Right now I'm on the room level, so if I saw multiple cabinets sitting next to each other, in fact, I'm going to have a drawer back here also. Show you one thing with drawer banks. Let's just make it 24 inches wide. So 3 cabinets here. Let's say I start changing the heights of drawer fronts. Ways I can do it. I can either right-click on a cabinet and pick section. Notice my ribbon bar changed. I'm in this mode right now. Even though I'm in the room level, I've isolated this one cabinet and I'm on the section view. Okay, we'll come back to that here in a second. I'm going to push escape a couple of times to get out of that mode. Besides right-click and section, most people go this second route. I kind of like the first route, right-click section. But this other way is to either right-click and say Edit, or you can just double-click the cabinet. That takes me to the cabinet level. Okay. From cabinet level, one of my view tabs is the section tab. So from this level, I can click on drawer fronts or doors and do different things with them. Notice I'm on the section face button here. If you go to section interior, I'm going to see different things in here. This is more for the shelves and things that go on inside the cabinets. Let me step back out here to the room level. I just tapped escape a few times to do that. I'm going to go to this cabinet, for instance, on the right. I'm going to right-click in section. We'll do this out in the room view. You can see this. Notice on the top drawer just highlights blue. If I click on middle drawer, I get two of them highlighting blue. The reason for that, if I right-click on here, I see equalize height. It's set as a default on a 3-drawer bank to make these two drawers the same size. But you don't have to do that. You can always right-click on one of those and equalize height. Now, a couple of things I can do here. I can either click on the gap between them and just drag it to whatever size I want it to be. I drag the side of a cabinet, though, that's not very accurate, so I usually don't recommend doing that. But what you can do is click on that face, and over here on the side I have a height column. So let's call this one 283. Now I can come here, and this drawer front is 321. It did the calculations for the difference between them. Okay, I want a little more contrast between them, so I'm going to go 203 on this. So you see a small, a medium, and a large drawer. Notice too, the drawer box didn't go all the way up. The system knows, based on the size of drawer front, what drawer box you can do in there, and this is maxing out the size of our dovetail drawers. That's the highest size they get. It's really nice if you ever have a question, because you can get in and actually use this measure tool we talked about earlier and measure how much head space you have in there. I've had people say, I have a particular mixer or a wine bottle or whatever that you're trying to store that you want to fit in a drawer or something, some kind of an opening. You can always measure that, and what you see on the drawings is exactly what you'll see when the physical cabinet shows up after an order. So I just have to escape to get back out of the section mode. I'm back to the room level. Now I can see how those drawer fronts line up with each other. Now, let's say I want to go back and equalize those. I can right-click in section, and if I right-click on that bottom drawer, it still has equalize height on it. So now all I have to do is right-click on this one and say equalize height. So that automatically does the math and splits them. It maintains the reveals between drawers. You don't have to do any of those calculations. It does it for you. On your though, you'll see over here a couple of other things you can do. You can lock the height or width of a section. Sometimes if you get a tall cabinet with 3 or 4 sections in it, doors, drawer fronts, whatever, you'll find that you'll want to lock some of them to keep it from changing the wrong thing. When you alter this one, it changes this one instead of this one, kind of a thing. You'll have to play with those settings. But lock and width, or right-click and equalize height and width. You can also access lock height and width from this menu too. So that's one thing you can do from sectioning view. Another thing you can do is a size adjustment over here. Now these adjustments are going to affect the size of whatever I've selected. So that drawer front, for instance, I can select it and say to the right, I'm going to add, well, let's add, this is ridiculous, but I'll add 152 to the side of that drawer front. I've extended that drawer front out. I'm not sure how you'd do that, but in a drawer front. However, there are lots of applications for this. For instance, if I insert an object, let's put a wall cabinet above. A very common thing we see is make a 30-inch wide wall cabinet. I'm going to right-click and pick section on this wall cabinet and extend its doors down. So the bottom, I'm going to say, let's go 51 millimeters or 2 inches. I've extended those doors down past the bottom of the cabinet. If I go to the cabinet level of this, I'll be able to see it better in 3D. There you kind of see those doors extending down. A lot of people do this to conceal their light valance. That's a good use for a door extension. This drawer front extending off to the side is kind of silly, but another use for it is on some of our wall cabinets. Let me go to a door drawer combo cabinet. You may have a cabinet like this that is sitting down on your countertop like this. so it sits right on the countertop. If that's the case, our drawers and doors, the default, if I go to a side view, you can see where our reveals are. The default is flush at the bottom. There's no reveal down there. If that's sitting on a countertop, that drawer front's going to drag. So most of the time I'll recommend to people to come in, send that drawer, and then the bottom, instead of like the doors I extended down, in this case I want to recess it. So I'm going to send negative, and let's just call it 6 millimeters, a quarter of an inch. So I've changed my reveal on that door, and I come in here now and I can see that drawer front shortens. So you have the ability to shorten, to extend, all of those things. The same functionality would work on a face frame cabinet. If I were to have a base open shelf cabinet, for instance, base shelf, and I'm going to put it over here near the wall, or against the wall even. Let's just make it whatever size we want here. Now, on that face frame, maybe you want to extend that face frame as scribe into the wall. The same process is here. So I right-click in section, click on my face frame, and then here on the right, let's just add 12 millimeters or a half an inch of scribe to that face frame. Notice it just moved the face frame into the wall. The cabinet is still, you see the dotted line is still outside of this end wall, but the face frame is extended in for scribe. So that's sectioning of a face frame. So that's changing heights and extending doors and drawer fronts up or down. Now, you can also, within a cabinet, I'm going to go to the cabinet level for this one. If I section view, section face, here I could do the same thing. I could change sizes, even though we have a standard top drawer front size. If I want to change it, I can alter it. The like the room level is because ice cabinet being different here. So I can right-click and pick section on this 3-drawer bank. I'm going to go to this one, and I think I said 203 there. I did. So it made that drawer front match. It equalized these two because they're set to equalize. Now I want to move my sectioning mode to this cabinet to do the same thing. So rather than to exit out and right-click section on this cabinet, if I just double-click on this cabinet to the side, I just moved my sectioning mode from the 3-drawer bank over to my BD1 here. Now I can click on that drawer front until it 203 also. So then I can get all my drawer fronts lined. I like sectioning from the elevation view because I can see how it relates to all other cabinets in the view. But it's totally up to you. So let me go cabinet level though, because section the interior now. There's a couple things in the interior you might do to a cabinet. For instance, if I look at my end view, I've got a little drawer stretcher here. That stretcher is basically there to give the doors something to close against. But you had sometimes somebody will put a item down here, a trash bin or a MIG lift or something that they don't want anything from this drawer to fall down and be able to fall down in here. We've had people put their kitty litter box in the bottom of a cabinet. If you don't want that the smell or something to be able to fall back and forth in between them, you can change this drawer stretcher to a shelf by going to the section view, section interior, clicking the drawer stretcher, and it highlights blue, but on the sidebar it tells me what I've selected there, so I can change that to a fixed shelf, for instance. I can also take this shelf here. If I click on it, it tells me it's an adjustable shelf. I can turn it into a fixed shelf if I want. Notice my adjustable shelf pins just went away, and I have dowel holes now, so I can position that wherever I want. Right now, notice it didn't let me drag that. That's because just like a drawer front, I can equal gaps between items. So here I've got two things highlighting blue. If I right-click and say unequalized item and uncheck this, now I'll be able to move this fixed shelf wherever I want. Now if I go to my end view, now I see dowel holes for this fixed shelf that we turned from a drawer stretcher into a fixed shelf, and the fixed shelf here. So now where I see that in the program is exactly where we're going to place it. So if I click on section view and section interior again, I can click inside that opening, and you can kind of see it here in this yellow color, but also up here in the side. I can put in, let's say I want 12 inches of space there. I can customize that cabinet however I want. I can come in here now and put a vertical divider in it if I want to make cubbies inside of a cabinet. Doesn't look anything here, but in my frame mode, I see those objects there. If I go back to the cabinet level into 3D, wireframe mode, you see all dowels firing. I can also come here in 3D and double click on my face. If I'm in the section face mode, I double click and I can open a door. If I do that, now I can look in here and see exactly how we're going to build that cabinet. All right? So you can measure the sizes of these cubbies, so you can customize the inside of a cabinet however you want. There are instances where you can customize the outside of a cabinet as well. We'll have to go those at another time. I'm just about out of time here today, but the gist that you can basically turn this cabinet into whatever you want. The nice thing is that as you do this, the Cabinet Vision software knows how much an adjustable shelf costs. So if I come in here and I want to, let's delete this shelf. So I'm just going to hit my delete key, or you could hit this red X delete button here. I click in that section. Now I can split this however I want to. So I can do a horizontal multi-split. In that, I'm going to pick adjustable shelves. Now, split into how many equal openings. Remember, this is openings, not shelves. So I want 3 gaps between 2 shelves. So I'm going to pick 3 for adjustable shelves, and it puts 2 adjustable shelves in there. The other thing to do is delete both of these. I'm going to click back in that opening and say horizontal multi-split. This time I want rollout trays. So I'm going to say 3 openings. Again, it's the gaps, not the rollout trays. It's the gaps between them. So 3 equal openings with rollout trays in between. So there's my 1, 2, 3 gaps with my 1, 2 roll trays. Now, where rollout trays are located right now, the system is going to say, oh, they must want them right in that exact position. There's a problem in this case. It doesn't work. It's right over the top of a hinge. But you go in and position these rollout trays however you'd like. There's no standard setting. You can either drag and drop like this, or I can come over here and I can change the dimension to 0, or I could click on this rollout tray and actually change its position from floating to bottom mount. Then I say right-click here and equalize height, right-click here and equalize height also to center the other rollout tray in the remainder of the opening. Or I might not want to do that. Maybe I want to have a bigger gap on the bottom and move my top rollout tray like that. So you can position these rollout trays wherever you want. Just remember, wherever you place them in your drawings is where we build them. So, all right, so that's the basics. We'll pick up tomorrow with right left off here with cabinet sectioning. And I'll open up for questions now. I'll turn everybody's microphones back